The moment Liam saw her, the world went still. Across the crowded room, amidst the hum of voices and the clinking of glasses, there she was. Ilara. His heart slammed into his chest. She hadn't changed. Time hadn't touched her. She was still the same radiant being who had haunted his dreams for years. Ilara's alien eyes found his almost immediately, as if she had been waiting for him, just as he had been waiting for her. The space between them stretched and contracted like a living thing, filled with the weight of all the years they had spent apart. His breath caught in his throat, and for a moment, he thought he might fall to his knees. But he couldn't. She was here. And his heart, despite everything, couldn't stop the fluttering of hope. Ilara's silver skin shimmered under the dim lights of the bar, her gaze unflinching, yet softer than he remembered. She took a step toward him, the crowd parting around her instinctively, as though she were something greater, something alien. Which, of course, she was. Her tall, slender form was bathed in the soft glow of the neon lights, but it was her eyes, those otherworldly, luminous eyes, that gripped him. They were full of unspoken things, a quiet ache of what could have been. Liam blinked, shaking himself from the trance. He had to say something. Anything. "Why are you here, Ilara?" His voice was low, rough, as if it hadn't been used in years. She stopped a few feet away from him, her gaze steady, almost regretful. The silence between them stretched out, filling the air with memories either of them was prepared to confront. "I had no choice," she said, her voice a soft melody, yet it trembled with an intensity he hadn't expected. "I needed to see you, Liam. After everything. I couldn't leave it like that." His chest tightened, the words like acid in his throat. He had spent years convincing himself that she was gone, that he had been abandoned for some greater cause. But here she was, standing before him, the air around her electric with the pulse of a bond he couldn't escape. "You left me," he muttered. His jaw clenched, anger rising. "You disappeared without a word. You broke everything, Ilara. You—" "I didn't want to." She cut him off, her voice barely a whisper now. "I couldn't tell you everything then. You wouldn't have understood. I still don't know if you will." Her words were like knives twisting in his gut. His hand, by instinct, reached out but stopped midair. He couldn't touch her, not yet. Not until he figured out why she was standing here, after all this time. "Then why are you here now?" he demanded, his voice tight. "What do you want?" A flicker of something, fear? Hope, passed over her face, but she masked it quickly, taking a breath before speaking again. "There's a war coming, Liam. And we need your help." His mind spun. "War? Help? You've got to be kidding," he said, laughing bitterly. "You just show up after years, and now you want my help? What happened to your higher purpose, your greater good?" "Please," she said, her voice urgent now, the pleading tone pulling him in against his will. "This is bigger than us. I didn't come to ask for forgiveness, Liam. I came because I need you. Your planet needs you." Liam could feel his heart race faster, but he forced himself to focus. He wasn't some naive fool. He knew the stakes. He had seen enough of the galaxy's cold indifference to understand the dangers of alien alliances, of political games played by higher powers that destroyed everything in their wake. The human race was weak, vulnerable, and here she was, standing in front of him like an emissary from the gods. She was asking him to risk everything, his life, his loyalty, his world. "You didn't think this through, did you?" he asked, taking a step back, his arms crossed. "After everything you've done, you want me to just, what? Drop everything? Risk my planet for you?" Her eyes flashed with a hint of something wild, something raw. But then she sighed, a deep, weary breath that seemed to carry centuries of regret. "I never wanted to leave you," she said, her voice soft but laced with a sorrow that tore at him. "I thought I could live without you. That I could forget. But I can't. And I've seen what's coming. The war is already beginning. The Erythian Empire is preparing to invade, and Earth won't survive it." A chill ran down Liam's spine. "And you think I can help stop that?" She nodded slowly, her gaze unwavering. Yes. You're the key. Your mind, your abilities, they're unlike any other humans. There's something inside you that the Erythians need. I don't understand it fully, but I know it's why I have to find you. The words landed with the weight of 1,000 stars. Liam's head spun, the reality of the situation starting to settle around him. The war wasn't just a distant, theoretical threat. It was here. It was now. And Elara, this woman who had broken his heart, was asking him to help save the world he had once vowed to protect. But could he? Could he risk it all again for a woman who had walked away from him so easily, without a backward glance? A woman who had returned, not with love, but with the burden of a world on her shoulders. Why me? He whispered, more to himself than to her. Why should I trust you? She reached out, her fingers grazing his wrist. The contact was electric. And for a moment, just a moment, it felt like no time had passed at all. Because, she said, her voice thick with emotion, I never stopped loving you. The words hung in the air between them, fragile and potent, as the weight of the universe pressed in on them both. And in that moment, Liam realized he wasn't just caught between the fate of two worlds. He was caught between his past and his future, between the woman he had once loved and the woman who could destroy him. The choice, it seemed, was no longer his to make. The sharp scent of burning ozone filled the air as the door to the safe house clicked shut behind them. Liam's muscles were taut, his mind still reeling from the sudden appearance of Elara. He didn't know how to process this, her return, the war, the things she had left unsaid. There was a storm of emotions swirling inside him, but one thing was clear, she was here, and nothing would be the same. Elara stood just a few feet away, her alien grace still as mesmerizing as ever. Her silver skin glowed faintly in the low light, her eyes full of shadows, the weight of years, the weight of an untold story pressing down on them both. He didn't want to look at her. He didn't want to feel anything. But his heart betrayed him, pounding in his chest, reminding him of a love he had buried so deep, it threatened to break through. I can't help you, he said, his voice more strained than he had intended. You disappeared. And now you're asking me to save your people? To save Earth? She moved closer, her footsteps soundless, graceful. I'm not asking you to save my people, Liam, she said softly. Her voice, thick with guilt, carried the weight of the truth he wasn't sure he was ready to hear. I'm asking you to save us both. Liam shook his head, frustration boiling beneath his skin. You left without a trace, Elara. Do you understand how that felt? To wake up one morning, and you were just gone. You don't get to waltz back into my life and ask me to just forgive and forget. The room was suffocating. The walls, the quiet hum of the machinery, everything felt like it was closing in on him. He needed to leave, but he couldn't make himself move. He didn't know what he wanted. He didn't know what he could do. I never wanted to leave you, she whispered. I didn't have a choice. You wouldn't have understood. And even if I tried to explain, I would have only made things worse. You wouldn't have believed me. Then why now? His voice was raw, desperate. Why come back when it's too late? She took another step closer, the faintest tremor in her hands betraying her calm facade. Because it's not too late. There's still time, Liam. There's always been time. And this war, it's coming. We need to stop it before it destroys everything. Liam narrowed his eyes, disbelief flooding him. This sounds like a war you started, he muttered. A war your people started. No, she said sharply, her gaze snapping to his. This isn't about me. I didn't come back for that. I came back for you, for us. His pulse quickened, but not from her words. There was something off in her tone, a flicker of something buried beneath the surface. A truth she wasn't telling him. He was tired of being kept in the dark, tired of living in the shadow of her secrets. You're still lying, he said, his voice lower now, controlled but seething. What aren't you telling me? Her eyes fluttered closed for a second, her breath steady but not as steady as she would have liked him to believe. When she opened them again, there was a new resolve in her expression, as if she had decided she could tell him something she hadn't before. "You were never just anyone to me, Liam," she began, each word careful. "And the reason I left, the reason I ran." She paused, the words hovering in the air between them. "I was saving you." "Saving me?" He laughed bitterly. "From what, Alara? From you? From the life we could have had?" Her eyes softened, her voice breaking for the first time. "I was saving you from what I had to do." Liam's confusion deepened. "What are you talking about? What could you possibly—" Before he could finish, a loud crash echoed through the building, followed by a series of muffled voices, shouting, running footsteps, the unmistakable sound of a breach. Liam's heart leaped into his throat. "No. Get down!" Alara hissed, pushing him behind the nearest table. The panic in her voice cut through the tension like a knife. "They found us." "Who?" Liam demanded, panic flickering for a split second before his training kicked in. He grabbed his gun, his instincts taking over. The calm he had been trying to hold on to shattered as the reality of the situation settled in. Alara wasn't just here because of a personal reunion. She was here because someone wanted her dead. "Alara!" Liam shouted over the commotion. "What the hell is going on?" She looked at him, her expression hardening, but her eyes were full of the same desperation that had filled them earlier. "The Erythians, they're enemies, they've found us. We can't stay here." "No shit," he muttered, scanning the room for an escape. He hated this, hated how everything was spiraling out of control. But there was no time to dwell on it. They were in danger, and all the anger and confusion he felt toward Alara was irrelevant in that moment. He didn't have time for it. Liam grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the back exit. "Move!" he barked. Alara didn't hesitate, her otherworldly agility helping her slip through the narrow gaps, her body flowing like water. She was a creature of purpose, of destiny, and for the first time, Liam felt like an outsider in her world. She had secrets, things he didn't know about. Things he hadn't been ready to understand. As they ran through the dimly lit corridors, Liam could feel his heart beating faster, the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He couldn't shake the feeling that everything was changing, that his world, his understanding of who he was, of what he believed, was slipping away with every passing second. They turned the corner just in time to see a figure emerging from the shadows. A man. Tall, with cold eyes that burned through the dim light like an animal hunting its prey. Alara stopped dead in her tracks, her eyes widening in recognition. "You shouldn't have come back, Alara," the man said, his voice low, menacing. Liam's grip on his weapon tightened. The stakes were higher now, and whatever secrets Alara was hiding, they were more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. The noise outside the safe house grew louder, vibrating through the walls like an animal on the hunt. Liam could feel the floor tremble as footsteps pounded overhead, the unmistakable sound of boots, heavily armored, approaching with determined precision. Alara's hand gripped his arm, her skin cold, even in the dim light of the room. Her eyes were wide, a mixture of fear and resolve. "Stay low," she whispered urgently, her voice trembling but steady, the alien cadence still strange yet familiar. Liam barely heard her. His heart was hammering too loudly in his chest, the echoes of their conversation, of their confrontation, mixing with the chaos outside. For a moment he considered running, fleeing into the night like he always had, cutting ties before things got worse. But then he glanced at Alara again, and all those thoughts shattered. She hadn't just shown up out of nowhere. She was here because she needed him. A blast of cold air swept through the room as Alara tugged open a narrow vent in the wall. The screech of metal against metal sent a shiver down his spine, but she moved with purpose. The years of distance between them dissolved in that instant. She wasn't the girl who had abandoned him. No, she was someone entirely different now. The mission, the war, it had changed her, and it had changed him. "Are they coming for us?" Liam's voice cracked, though he hated that it did. He wasn't some rookie. He was supposed to be the one giving the orders. "They're not here for you." she said, her eyes focused on the vent as she ripped it open further. But they know I'm here. And they won't stop until I'm either dead or back with them. Her words were cold, calculated. But there was something beneath that, something darker that slipped into her gaze when she glanced at him again. Liam stiffened. You're telling me you're a target now? Again? She didn't answer immediately. Her fingers brushed over a set of hidden controls along the wall, and the floor beneath them shifted, revealing an underground tunnel. The faintest echo of a distant rumble signaled that it was time to move, and move quickly. He stood, not fully comprehending the situation but knowing one thing: this was bigger than them both now. I'm not just a target, Liam, Elara said quietly, her voice distant. I'm the key to ending this war. My people, they believe I can stop it, or start it. But the truth is, either of us is ready for what's coming. The weight of her words hit him harder than the threat of their enemies. There was more to this than she was saying. But before he could ask, she was already moving toward the tunnel, pulling him after her. The passage beneath the safe house was damp and narrow, the air thick with the scent of rust and earth. Each step felt heavier, the pressure mounting in his chest, both from the danger and from the unspoken truth that simmered between them. The further they went, the more the walls seemed to close in. But it wasn't just the tunnel that felt suffocating, it was the memories. The years he'd spent hating her for leaving, for vanishing without a word, for not giving him the chance to be angry or to understand. Now, he was here with her again, and despite everything, despite the impossibility of it, his body still reacted to her presence. His heart still stuttered when she glanced at him, when she brushed against him. The pull between them hadn't faded, it had only grown stronger, buried beneath layers of hurt and regret. He could feel the heat between them, the electric charge that never fully left. But it was dangerous. He couldn't let himself fall into that old, familiar trap again. I didn't ask for this, Liam said, breaking the silence, his voice low, but cutting through the tense air like a blade. I didn't ask for any of this. I know, Elara replied, her voice barely above a whisper. But you're here, Liam. And that's all that matters now. We can't do this without you. He could feel her eyes on him, but he refused to meet her gaze. Not now. Not when the weight of her words and the pain of their past threatened to overwhelm him. But there was something in the way she said those last words, "We can't do this without you," that made his stomach tighten. She still needs me. Despite the chaos, despite the war that loomed over them, despite the years of hurt and betrayal, he knew deep down he couldn't walk away from this. Not again. Not when the stakes were this high. Suddenly, the distant sound of footsteps echoed down the tunnel. They were getting closer. Elara's pace quickened, and Liam followed, his mind racing. He wanted to trust her, he did. But there was still so much she wasn't saying. So much he didn't understand. We don't have much time, Elara murmured, her voice urgent now. Her hand brushed against his as she moved past him, the contact brief but electric. The same familiar warmth flooded his chest, and despite himself, despite everything, he found himself wishing for something that no longer seemed possible, something that might never be again. As they neared the end of the tunnel, the sounds of pursuit grew louder, more distinct. Whoever was following them had caught on to their trail. The enemies outside were close, too close for comfort. Liam's heart hammered in his chest as he scanned the dimly lit passage ahead, willing himself to stay calm. Elara, he said, his voice harsh. What aren't you telling me? She paused, her back to him, her breath steady but her shoulders tense. Slowly, she turned to face him, and for a moment, he could see the battle behind her eyes, the conflict between duty and desire, between the woman she was and the one she'd been forced to become. I'm not sure you can handle the truth, Liam, she said, her words laced with something unspoken, something heavy. I've handled worse, he snapped. So tell me. But before she could respond, the sound of boots echoed behind them. The tunnel was no longer an escape. It was a trap. And for the first time in years, Liam had no idea if they were going to make it out alive. The tunnel stretched ahead, endless and suffocating, the low hum of the underground air pushing against them, urging them forward. Elara moved with an unnatural grace, her silver skin glowing faintly in the dim light, casting an eerie reflection on the wet walls. Liam trailed behind, his footsteps heavy, his mind racing, trying to make sense of everything. Her words still lingered, echoing in his thoughts. "We can't do this without you." But what did that mean? Was she talking about the war? Or something else? Something deeper? They had been running for what felt like hours, the darkness of the tunnel swallowing them whole, leaving no trace of the world above. The muffled sounds of their pursuers were distant now, but the tension in the air hadn't eased. Liam could still feel the weight of the gun in his holster, a constant reminder that they weren't safe. Not yet. Finally, Elara stopped, her hand pressed against the cold stone of the tunnel wall. "We need to rest," she said, her voice clipped but soft, betraying the exhaustion she was trying to hide. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, there was no mission, no war. Just two people, broken and lost, trying to survive. Liam nodded, his breath heavy in his chest. He wanted to say something, ask her what was really going on, why she hadn't come to him sooner, why she had left him. But the words caught in his throat. They were too raw, too painful. The past hung between them, a heavy fog that neither of them knew how to clear. Instead, he let out a breath and lowered himself to sit on the cold stone floor beside her. They were safe for the moment. But for how long? "I never wanted to hurt you," Elara said, her voice low and barely above a whisper, the quietness of the moment wrapping around them like a fragile thread. "I never wanted to leave you behind, Liam. But I didn't have a choice. You weren't supposed to know what was really happening." Liam clenched his jaw, resisting the urge to speak, to yell, to demand answers. Instead, he looked at her, his eyes searching for something he wasn't sure he'd ever find. "Why did you come back? What are we running from?" he finally asked, his voice breaking the silence. "Who are they? Who's chasing us?" Elara hesitated, the faintest flicker of fear crossing her face. Her fingers twitched, betraying her calm exterior. "They're called the Arcanis," she said, the name foreign on her tongue. "A faction of my people, or what's left of them. After the war, they tried to destroy everything. Earth, my home, my family. They were ready to burn it all down." Liam's heart tightened in his chest. "And you? You were part of them?" "No," she said sharply, the word carrying a weight he couldn't ignore. "I never wanted this. But they forced me into it. You don't understand, Liam. You don't know what they'll do to stop me." Liam's thoughts spiraled. He had always known there was more to Elara's story, but this was something else entirely. A war between her people. And she had been a part of it? "And now you want me to help you fight them?" He laughed, but it was bitter, hollow. "I don't know what to believe anymore. You've lied to me, Elara. You left me with nothing. And now you expect me to trust you?" The words hit her like a physical blow. Her expression faltered for a second, her eyes flashing with an emotion he couldn't quite place. Pain, perhaps. Regret. But then it was gone, replaced by the cold mask she had perfected over the years. "I don't expect you to trust me," she said, her voice soft but firm. "But I need you. Because if we don't stop the Arcanis now, if we don't find the key, they will destroy everything." "The key?" Liam echoed, confused. "What are you talking about? What key?" She swallowed hard, her throat working. "The key is a weapon. A force capable of destroying entire worlds. And I..." Her voice broke for a moment, a brief crack in her carefully constructed walls. "I have it. Or rather, I am it." Liam stared at her, disbelief flooding through him. You're the key?" Elara nodded, her eyes distant, as if lost in some dark memory. "Yes. My people, they knew what I could do. They knew that, with the right push, I could either destroy or save everything. They wanted to control me. But I couldn't let them. So I ran." The weight of her words sank in. She was the weapon? The one thing that could either end or save the war? It didn't make sense. "But if they know what you are," Liam said, his voice low and dangerous. Why haven't they killed you? They need me alive, she answered, the words coming out as a whisper, almost too soft to hear. I'm the only one who can activate the weapon. I'm the only one who can stop the war. But they don't want me to stop it. They want to control it, Liam. They want to use me as a tool of destruction. A cold fury settled in Liam's chest. He didn't understand it all yet, couldn't even begin to wrap his mind around it, but one thing was clear: Elara was in deeper than he'd ever imagined. And he was tangled up in it now, whether he liked it or not. So what's the plan? He asked, his voice hardening with determination. How do we stop them? Elara looked at him then, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and something else, something like hope, though it was fleeting. We need to find the artifact, the one thing that can either seal the key away or destroy it. It's the only way to keep the Arcanis from using me to wipe out entire planets. And where is it? Elara swallowed, her gaze dropping to the ground. I don't know. But I have a lead. A place. A person who might have the answers. The air between them shifted, thick with tension and unspoken promises. They had no choice now. The war was coming. And they had no more time to waste. Liam met her gaze. Then let's find it.